Tami Kiekhaefer is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist with over 2 decades of experience in mental health. She founded her private practice in 2002, focusing on individual, couples, and family therapy. Her areas of expertise include anxiety, depression, trauma, grief, domestic violence, and relationship dynamics. Tami integrates traditional therapy with yoga, offering yoga therapy sessions to address both emotional and physical well-being. As an author, Tami penned Preparing for the Jungle, Avoiding Snakes and Pitfalls on the Path to Healthy Love, a resource designed to help individuals navigate and build healthy relationships. And she followed that up with From Chaos to Calm. She also co-hosts the Unguarded Minds podcast, where she discusses mental health topics and shares insights with her audience. I can highly recommend listening to Tami's podcast after you listen to this, of course. But yeah, highly recommend it. Beyond her professional endeavors, Tami is a mother of 2 boys and has been recognized for her resilience and dedication to both her family and clients. You're very welcome joining us today from Colorado. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I was fascinated by your profile, by what you've written, by your podcast, and yeah, you're really exploring areas that, and we talked just before we hit record, that are very much needed at the present time. You've had a very diverse career in mental health, and so before we go into that thoroughly, I wanted to go back a little bit and just understand a bit about your formative years, what life was like growing up. Can you connect the person you were in your sort of teenage years to who you are today? What's your journey been?
Yes. So thank you, first of all, Andrew, for having me on here today. It's so great to meet you, especially in a different country, and it's so nice to connect with people. Um, so growing up, I think I was one of those rare people that I just knew exactly what I wanted to do from a young age. I remember I was in 10th grade and I was in my geometry class and she was talking about math and all these things. And I'm like, this is definitely what I don't understand. I I'm going to
Like
have
me.
a private practice. I want to be a counselor. I want to help people. And I knew from that time in my life that I just wanted to. I always thought the human brain and personalities and human behavior is fascinating, and I just wanted to learn more about that and not so much about geometry. So it was very clear. Yeah, I don't know what hit me, but I've stayed the course, and I've worked in a bunch of different environments to try to understand different settings and people and backgrounds. And then I've been in private practice for about 23 years, 24 years. Yeah.
And what was it that made you transition from working in different places to doing the private practice?
I think, well, I always wanted to have a private practice, to work on my own, to be
Mhm.
my own boss. That was always important to me, especially raising 2 boys. And being available for them. I was, really active in their schools and in their lives. And so to have the flexibility was very important to me. But I wanted to feel like I had enough experience in different areas to have that. You have to have a responsibility. You're working with human lives,
Yeah.
and just to be as informed and educated and have that hands-on experience. So I worked in the corrections. I worked in inpatient mental hospitals, outpatient. I worked in schools. I worked for organizations. So I felt like I was just ready, and the timing hit, and I've been super fortunate to be able to keep my doors open for this long.
It's really fabulous. And it's a I think therapy in the UK is perhaps a few years behind where therapy is in the US, or rather, I think our appreciation of therapy. And I think in the UK, we might. I've been to see a therapist. You might see a therapist when something's happened, when maybe there's a death in a family, or you've lost your job or whatever. And we seem to see therapy as something that is a. I remember when I went to see my therapist, and I didn't say the words, "Right, I'm here, fix me," but that was sort of what I was thinking. And I think, why do you think we see therapy as something that's to address a particular thing, as opposed to therapy as something like when you go to the dentist that makes sure your teeth are healthy, not necessarily when you're just in pain? How is it seen in the US? Is it seen more as a maintenance type thing?
We're evolving. it's
Mhm.
getting better. I think that probably 20 years ago, it was, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
What can't you do by yourself? What do you need help with? What are you struggling with? Why are you struggling so much? Um, and then, I kind of, just when you were talking, I was thinking the millennials who have come along and are just like, oh, here's my therapist. Who's your therapist? Oh, I have my therapy appointment. Let's meet after our therapy appointments, and I think that age group has really encouraged self-discovery
Mhm.
and self-reflection, and that it's okay to go in for more of a preventative type way of thinking instead of, I'm in crisis. I think still, I probably, the majority of my clients who call are in crisis and need to get in now. So, and I think it's maybe, you have to excuse me, I have a cold.
Oh.
Um, but I think it's getting better. But I think even my clients will call and say, I need to get in now. I rarely get someone who says, I will prevent some things that are going on. I want to I'm anticipating having a tough time
Yeah.
with a job change, or there's not a whole lot of anticipation. It's definitely more like I've tried everything I can and I've tried to rationalize it and I've read the books and I've listened to the podcast and now I need to talk to a person. So it takes a lot of courage to get into counseling, though.
It does. I mean, I guess people have views that are formed by popular media, by television, by maybe one of their friends or a therapist or a counselor. But in the same way that every person's journey is different, every therapist is different, and not everybody is going to connect with every therapist, and every therapist is going to be able to offer something that somebody wants. But I always think one of the challenges that you must face, you might not accept this, but is almost you sort of think, oh, I wish you'd come to see me 6 months ago. Especially when you have a relationship challenge, and you have a couple that comes in, and perhaps one of them wants to come more than the other one, and this is sort of
Yes.
the lost chance saloon type of thing, and you're like presented with this 30 years worth of we don't talk anymore, and he ignores me, she ignores me. Right. Anyway, so welcome. It's so how do you handle it when they've been, like you say, they've been through the books and they talk to their friends and they've perhaps
Mhm.
seen another counselor, whatever. How do you handle that obviously what's something that's built up over 30 years?
No,
You
it's
can't suddenly
pretty
fix
rare.
in 4 sessions, can
um,
you?
so I think that a lot of it is the listening and the validating, and I always try to start where my clients are, not where I think they should be. That's never going to work. But it just a lot of
Okay.
um, nurturing to say, look, it's taking you this long to get to where you are. It's going to take some time to undo some of these horrible habits that you have formed. And a lot of times in relationships, um, we come into a relationship with our own stuff about how we grew up and our family dynamics and what we were role modeled, how to communicate and how to resolve
Yeah.
conflict. And I think that when you're younger, it's kind of all you
Hmm.
know. But when you're able to get out of the family dynamic, maybe, you move out or you go to college or you get your own place, you have your own job. That's when you get to really practice what you grew up with. And that's when you get to decide, is this working for me or is this not working for me? And I wish more people would do that self
Yeah.
reflection. Although, here I am. I am divorced and I was doing couples counseling while I was getting divorced, which was a very interesting dynamic. And it kind of, that's where my book came out of, the just sitting there going, holy cow, Tammy, you're helping these people because you can see, other people's stuff is always easier to see than your own stuff. And I think that goes back to, why do people wait to get into counseling if there's a crisis, is because you don't see the wreckage until you get that 30,000 feet away from it viewpoint. And you look down at it and go, holy cow, this didn't just start
Yeah.
yesterday. This didn't just start. These are things that I brought into my relationship from how I grew up. And I didn't realize that they weren't healthy until I was in it, and it wasn't working. And then I had to step back and say, I don't ever want to get divorced again. I don't ever want to put my kids through something like that. So I have to step back and learn, what can I change, and what are my own unhealthy patterns. And it was eye opening. Yeah. But now I'm remarried, and I'm in one of the healthiest relationships I think I've ever been in. And it's not that we don't argue and bicker, but I think that we both have the skills to be able to handle conflict and manage it in a different way, and it's a game changer. And I didn't have those skills before.
It's interesting to say that, because I think some people listening might think that a good or a healthy relationship just means always agreeing, never arguing, never bickering. Whatever. How would you
Respect,
define a healthy relationship?
appreciation, good communication, validation, um, basically taking your ego and putting it in the back seat. um, an ego, not narcissistic ego-y kind of thing, but just the ego of defenses. It's just, I think that it's so easy to put your defenses up, and then there's no dialogue and there's no communication.
Yeah.
But to be able to recognize, like, I'm starting to get defensive, I either need to take a pause, I need to address, why am I getting defensive? I need to tell my partner, I'm starting to get defensive. This conversation isn't going to go well. I need to collect myself. It takes a lot of internal discipline to even be able to do that, because there's this other side that you're like, haha, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to fight you till the end until you agree with me. And then there's not a connection. There wasn't a
Yeah.
dialogue. And that's when I think respect goes out the window, and trusting. I work from a foundation of a relationship, is what I call
Yeah.
it. And basically there's four areas. There's trust. And I think of trust as like creating a trusting atmosphere where you can talk and you can be open and you can get vulnerable. But trust, respect, appreciation, and communication. I feel like in any relationship, that's the foundation that has to be in place. And then intimacy is what separates a romantic relationship from a neighbor, a colleague, or a family member. And so intimacy is oftentimes the first thing to leave a relationship if those four areas are disconnected. And sometimes it's the last to come back. And not intimacy, not just the sex part, but intimacy of a closeness, of a depth, of a physical, emotional, soulful
Yeah.
connection. And I think that's oftentimes the first thing to go because of the defenses, and that's a vulnerable space.
And it's hard, because I think sometimes when one partner brings up a point or a topic that, or something the other person does that frustrates them, I don't know, they might sort of say, "Oh, we've been doing that thing in bed for the last 5 years. I hate it when you I don't know, blow my ear, or I hate it when you tickle my knee, or whatever." And oh my gosh, because that person's been thinking about it for the last week, month, year, 2 years, and then suddenly they're throwing it out there, and that other person is, oh my, I'm hearing it for the first time. How am I supposed to react? And it's, you almost think, well, you're on the same page as me, but I'm probably 2 years ahead of you. And actually, I've been thinking about this for 2 years. It's frustrated the hell out of me, and I'm finally broken. And you're not responding how I want you to. And what are you saying? Your knee? What? It's, yeah, that's the hard thing, I think, because we don't, even though we are supposedly evolved individuals, we sometimes aren't very rational in how we go about things. So I think one of the things that you talked about there were the sort of four pillars, and I think that the really key thing is how can people communicate more, is it effectively? How can people communicate in a better way? Because you can shout so somebody can physically hear you, but that isn't the same as communicating. Is that one of the challenges that people present with? When you listen to them, you think this is all about how you
Yeah.
communicate. You're
And I
talking,
don't
but
know
you're
if you've
not
ever thought
communicating.
about
So I think
this,
there's a
but it's
difference.
almost like people just want to be heard. People want to be listened to and heard. And I think
Yeah.
it's just an instinct to say, "Oh, you didn't hear me. Let me tell you again." And, "Oh, you didn't hear me. Let me speak a little louder." And so when both people are doing that, like, here's
Yeah.
where I'm coming from. Well, here's where I'm coming from. Well, here's where I'm coming from. And the escalation just happens. But the more you're speaking from, you're not hearing me and I'm getting so frustrated, the defensive wall just starts to come up. And so I think that the opposite of that again
Yeah.
would be, okay, hold on a second. One of us has to go first. And it's not to say that you can't say your own opinion, but if you're both saying your own opinion at the same time, you're obviously
Mhm.
have a differing of opinions. Otherwise, you wouldn't be arguing, but you just can't come at it at the same exact time. And so one person has to go first. And then that's where the validation comes in. And validation, I think, is, oh my gosh, it's so hard because it does take a lot of discipline because you want to say, no, 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 that's not how that went, or that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. You want to defend yourself, but your perception is your reality. And so if your person
Yeah.
has a perception of what they heard, they need to know that you heard them and to say, okay, it sounds like you got super frustrated when I said that. And then you put a period there, not a comma, but a period. And eventually it's like, thank
Hmm.
you for hearing me. And you can just watch that defensive wall just melt. And now you can come in and say, okay, can I clarify? Here's where I was coming from. Here's what I meant. Here's what my perspective is. And then the other person validates. I mean, it's like an equation. It's an equation that actually works. But when you take away part of that
Yeah.
equation, which is validation and
Hmm.
hearing and respect, everything kind of goes out the window.
Mm. And one of the other areas you touch on and support people on is domestic violence and domestic abuse. Now, how do you help people recognize that these sort of arguments, these discussions, this communication sort of strayed the wrong side of the line? Because and I've talked to people before who've been in challenging relationships and abusive relationships, and they've sort of said that it's taken them a long time to actually realize what was happening. They've sort of it's become part of a circular pattern that something happens, everything's nice again, something happens, it's nice, and it almost becomes normalized. How do we help people
That's such a good
get out of that
question.
cycle?
And I think the bottom line is fear. When you were talking about the evolution, and I think that, we have that lizard
Yeah.
brain, that
Hmm.
survival, that when you're in that moment of fight or flight
Yep.
and you're not thinking about it and you haven't taken a step back or taken a pause, you're going to come out and strike, or you're going to run, or you're going to freeze. And I think that fear
Hmm.
of, I mean, really at a bottom basic level, fear of rejection and fear of abandonment drive every single one of those negative behaviors. And and I talk about that in my book too, because I think I call it the cone of fear. But it's about recognizing where
Hmm.
your vulnerable insecurity, like we all have insecurities, but what are they? What are they based on? Is it
Yep.
shame? Is it guilt? Is it sadness? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Fear of rejection and abandonment. And that's going back to, I'm a big follower of attachment theory. I think I subscribe to that also. But how we learned how to trust people and how we learned how
Hmm.
to trust our environment, you learn that between 0 and 3 years old. So when people come in and they're saying, I want you to fix me. we, all we will go back and talk a little bit about. I'm not a fan of staying stuck in the past, but I think that there's things that people have been through that you have to bring up and address and work through so that you can come
Definitely.
to terms with it and find some peace with your past, which has to do
Mm.
with recognition and forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. Forgiveness means I've got to come to some type of peace inside of myself so that I can move forward and learn. But I think that fear drives all of those defensive
Mm.
behaviors. And so I think that, like with domestic violence, it doesn't just start, typically it doesn't just start out with that type of aggression where you go up and punch someone in the face. It starts out with, I'm feeling out of
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
I'm feeling powerless and I don't know what to do with it. So the immediate response, the immediate gratification is to gain power and control over other people. And that's fear. That's fear. If I don't have control over
Yeah.
you, you won't accept me. You're going to leave me. You're going to reject me. And so I try to really
Yeah.
delve into those
Yeah.
fears, and it it's not an easy place
Mhm.
for people to get to because you're bringing up a lot of stuff. But if they're willing to do the work, the payout is it's invaluable.
Yeah. And that feels like one of the things that is it can just carry on through the generations. Whether it's part of our DNA or it's just part of what we experience. And this you find a lot of people that witnessed domestic violence sometimes become the domestic violence perpetuator, and it's hard. 'Cause like I said, when you're such a young age, you don't have the mental ability to rationalize what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and like I say, you just don't want to lose something. And exactly as you say, it's like putting a bird in a cage. If I lock the door, the bird can't get out. There you go. That's it. And not thinking about does it want to be in the cage, and that's the yeah. It must be very very hard. But as you said, it must be very satisfying or gratifying when
Yeah.
there is a noticeable step change and that people do start to properly trust and respect one another. If that's possible,
I
it
think
must
the
be
trick is,
a big
and
big
I
thing to
love your analogy of the bird in the
come to terms with.
cage. The trick is to not get too comfortable in the cage and to just give in and sit on the pedestal and just go,
Yeah,
well, here's my surroundings and here's what I'm up against and here's my life, because it just doesn't have to be that way. And you don't know until someone else comes along and you're able to open up and someone says, wait a second, this is not okay. Did you know that this isn't okay? How are you really feeling? How are you content? Are you happy? And is it an honest content, or is it I've just lost myself and I don't know what else to do, so I'm succumbing to my cage? And I think that's just one of the saddest things to watch.
yeah. It's that sort of sense that
Yeah.
you're not worth anything more than being. You're lucky to be in the cage, and anything you might try and you're just not. But like you said, it's not something that it happens from day one. This is a slow build up, and it's taking away from your friends, moving away, stopping working, all of those things, the little things. Each individual thing by itself is almost quite nondescript. But when you bulk it all together, and that's why I guess it is always easier to
Yeah.
see what to see what somebody else should do rather than see what you should do yourself. That yeah, you think, well, surely I can see it for myself, but no. Sometimes we just can't see it. And you hear yourself talking and think, but
Yeah.
that's my life, and
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah, it's not okay. Definitely. So when you wrote the book, the title's quite evocative. So why did you call
It's
it
the book has kind
"Preparing
of
for the
evolved in
Jungle"?
my head from when I wrote it, and since it's been published. But I'm like,
Mhm.
it's out there. I'm not going to change it. But it initially started because I was trying to help people to not continue to get into the same relationships over and over and over again, and trying to help people understand why they were attracted to certain types of people. And then I remember doing a podcast one time and someone was like, well, how do you know
Yeah.
if you're the snake? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so fascinating because you're right. We've all kind of been the snake. So here we are avoiding the snakes, but maybe it's the self-reflection of
Yeah.
saying, are you the one showing up and being unhealthy in your relationship? But yeah, no, I think it started out that way. And now in my mind, I talk to people about this is how you become so confident that you won't tolerate behavior that is outside of your non-negotiables. You know, this is how you show up and you exert this energy that I'm here for a healthy relationship. And if you're here to be in a partnership with me, awesome, let's see what we can do. And if not, I gotta go. I don't have time for this. And I think that it's just a matter of saying, okay, I get how I grew up. I get how I attached. I get personality types. I know my personality type. I get different communication patterns. I get I want to come up with my non-negotiables. I've got clients who have a little piece of paper, and I've got a gentleman that puts it in his wallet, and when these are his non-negotiables, and when he's out, he'll pull his list out at the table. All right, here's my deal. Because I think people are just so tired of wasting time, and they're not willing to put up with the, if you've sat and done and invested in yourself and done the work and the self-reflection and the learning and the growing, you don't want to be with someone who hasn't done the same work. And so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So waiting or hoping someone is going to sort of catch up with you isn't exciting, really. Yeah, I think meeting somebody where they are, if they're in the same place as you, is so much more enjoyable. And then from chaos, which most people don't enjoy, to calm, most people do enjoy. So what approach did that book take?
Anxiety is rampant, and just as we were talking a little bit off camera, but
Yes.
I don't know one person that doesn't have a little bit of anxiety, all the way up to daily panic attacks. And it's just such a debilitating emotion. And so part of the book is normalizing anxiety, because it is just an emotion. It's just, you can use anxiety for positive ways also, to be motivating, to keep yourself safe, to have an awareness of your surroundings, there's some positive things about it also. So I try to help people understand it's not just a horrible emotion. It's there for a reason. But I help people learn how to manage their own symptoms instead of trying to control the things around them so that they don't get anxiety, because that's impossible. But when, and I've learned myself, I've had the anxiety and the panic attacks myself also. I think I've lived both of my books before I wrote them. But yeah, I think that confidence piece, when you can control your symptoms internally, life becomes a game changer. Your confidence to get out into life, like when your anxiety is high, your confidence is low, and when your confidence is high, your anxiety is low. And so it's about also another book around, building that confidence up, and then learning how does anxiety show up for you? How does it show up for me? It shows up in your body in different ways, and there's different triggers, and there's different types of anxiety, and whether it's a anticipatory anxiety, whether it's obsessive compulsive, whether it just takes all kinds of forms. But to really understand, how does it show up in your life, and what can you do to manage the symptoms?
I think my mum, who sadly passed away just under 2 years ago, she was very much sort of full of anxiety and worry, and I used to sort of try and sort of talk to her a little bit. If you worry about something before it's happened, and that thing doesn't happen, then you worry for no point. If you worry about it and it does happen, it's twice as bad. So it's so easy for me to say, "Oh, Mum, just stop worrying. Everything's going to be fine." So how do I know? But it's hard, isn't it? 'Cause you can, and particularly at the moment, we talked before about this, the sheer volume of communication that's fired at us on a sort of second by second basis. It's if you absorbed everything that was fired at you, oh my goodness, you'd be in an anxious wreck, I think. So what is there a connection
There
between
is, for
anxiety
sure. I
and
think that they
depression?
often go hand in hand, because if you think of it as a circle,
Mhm.
cyclical
Okay.
process, your depression is, it just zaps your energy, and you don't find joy in life, and you just kind of feel
Yeah.
numb. And there's a fear around that, like, whoa, what if this never goes
Hmm.
away? What if I never get to enjoy things my kids are doing? What if I don't have the energy to get up out of bed? What if I don't have the oomph that I thought that I used to have, or something? There's an anxiety that comes from that, which is the fear of the unknown. And then that causes more depression, which causes more anxiety, and it can
Mm.
just go around in a cycle. Um, it's not to say that you always will have both. Some people just have some depression, some people just have some anxiety. Um, but I
Yeah.
think you're right. Like, if you've ever had anxiety and someone comes in and says, like, why are you worrying about this? It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That's sometimes that can just be so maddening. And I've looked at that as like the difference between, in your brain, you've got your left side
Yeah.
and your right side of your brain, and your left side is all your logic, and your right side is more of your emotion and creativity. And so
Hmm.
so when you're having anxiety, it's impossible to use both sides of your brain at the same exact time at a very high level of functioning. So what happens is the anxiety kicks in, your right brain amps up, which makes your left brain kind of go to sleep, if you think about it like that. So if somebody else who's not experiencing anxiety comes in
Yeah.
and says, "Whoa, why are you so anxious? Don't worry about it." Their intentions are the best. The outcome isn't probably going to work, because the other
Yeah.
person is, I think of it as someone speaking like German and someone else speaking Chinese, like two completely different languages, and you're not connecting.
Hmm.
And so then that's going to cause the anxious person to be even more anxious, because now all of a sudden they might be feeling stupid or feeling misunderstood or feeling attacked, or and then it just amps up
Yeah.
those anxiety symptoms. So yeah, it's just, it can be hard. I think that the best
Mm.
thing that you can do for somebody that is having anxiety is to connect with them and just offer, I'm here for you. We're gonna get through this. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm on your side. Maybe if they're open to it, placing your hand on their shoulder or their back, or some human connection, but to say, I got you. Sometimes that in itself is
Yeah.
just like, oh, okay, I'm not by myself. I don't have to do this by myself. Yeah, but to come in and try to point out some logic stuff, it's not that they're wrong. They're just not accept that at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've had have a depression for the last, gosh, how old am I now? 30 years or so. And medication and so many different things. And I've had people, maybe a while ago, literally say, "Come on, just pull yourself together." And part of you is like, "Oh, so pull myself together. That's what I should be doing." And and there's sometimes even now where I have to go to bed for the day. I think that's just a better place for me. But like you said, the anxiety comes when you think, okay, the only place I'm going to be safe is in bed, and I'm not
Yes.
going to be able to get out of here again. That's when it becomes very difficult. And you're so right. Just having somebody that is there for you and isn't sat there half talking to you, half on their phone, or half doing something else. And just to know that somebody is there for when you feel able to get out of bed, and they're not going to challenge you for, "Oh, so what for you going off to bed for the day?" It's like, well, I'd much rather do something else. It is people. People do absolutely want to do things with the best intentions. Like, "Oh, come on, let's go out for a walk, or let's get some fresh air," and your rational brain says all of those things are absolutely right,
Yeah.
but in the moment, in that sort of depressive state, it's just not going to happen. You've got to get yourself out of that, and the way to do that is hopefully that somebody's going to be there, will support you, and will offer it, and has that has your best intentions at heart. But no, absolutely, and being able to talk about it. And I found certainly talking with a therapist, it's just quite different because I, as a client or as a patient, whatever you want to call it, it's quite rare that somebody will listen to you completely for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. In this sort of time that we're living through, it's that, and 45 minutes is such a long time. We have a 2-minute attention span, and we go off somewhere else, whatever. But actually, being able to talk and somebody's listening because the questions they're asking you back or prompts they're giving you are showing that they're talking. It's even that is so powerful. It doesn't necessarily matter in a way I found what the therapist was saying, because they're not going to cure me, but being able just to talk and have that space and that time, it was so energizing.
I love
Sorry,
it that
me,
you were
but
saying these
yeah.
things, because I think that it just speaks to human connection, and I think that with AI taking over so many things, I think that getting that human connection, whether it's like this over, or if it's in person, but to actually have somebody who gives you that time and space and is there for you. And like you said earlier, finding a therapist can be really tough. And you have to find someone who you can really connect with and be open with. Otherwise you're not going to get anything out of it, because you're going to hold back, and and you're going to be guarded, and you're going to wonder, like, are they judging me? Are they like, what am I doing? So you have to find somebody to connect. But you're so right. And having that space of, that depression where you just want to get in bed and not get out, and just feel like this is the only place I can be safe. Of course there's going to be some anxiety that comes from that, because at some point you do have to get out, and at some point, what's the world going to look like now that I've had this experience? Yeah.
Yeah. I think all of us have those days,
Yeah.
certainly of late, where we just want to pull the duvet over our head and just block out the news and everything else and things. But also, I think with relationships, I'm thinking about this more and more recently. I think because my children are sort of late teens, they're going to be leaving home soon and hopefully going off to college or doing whatever they want to do, and so the house is going to be quite different. And I've heard the phrase sort of empty nester. And you sort of think you've had this relationship with a loved one, with your partner for 10, 20, 30 years, and you've had the children as been sort of front of mind, and you've been from picking them up when they fall over to ferrying them backwards and forwards to parties and everything else, and then suddenly you look across and think, oh, it's just the two of us. Right. And you haven't necessarily talked in the last 25, you've talked, but in the last 25 years to say, that thing we sort of used to do when we were sort of dating, when we were sort of 22, 23, where I used to, I don't know, kiss your toes, whatever, just to like that. We would do that. No, I didn't want to like it then. You think, well, so we don't actually check in to say, well, my taste, my desires, my thoughts, my whatever has changed in the last 25, 30 years. And I was talking to somebody in they're part of the BDSM community, and they were saying that a lot of the enjoyment they get is from the sort of negotiation of what they do and what they don't do. And I think sometimes we can learn from that, where we don't talk about what we like, don't like, in whether it's in intimate moments or it's just in our day-to-day life. We don't, things just evolve, I guess. And I think so. Probably that's a good time to go and talk to somebody, almost as a tune-up. Is that right? Because you've been in this for 25 years, worked, you've got the kids through school and college safely, right? Okay, now it's your turn. Right. And you think, gosh, what does that mean, my turn? What do I do now? Do you get people that come to you in that sort of phase of their life, and they obviously love each other and they want to be together, but they just,
how do we do this thing?
Okay, I just need a bit of help now.
I think that's kind of the midlife crisis that people talk about. And personally, I feel like we have many little midlife crises Yeah. Yes. For myself, I can
Yes, mini
pinpoint pretty much
crises.
every
Yes.
7 years I go through it, and it probably drives everyone crazy around me. But there it is. And it's not where my personality changes, but my perspective on life
Mm.
changes, my needs, my expectations of myself, probably expectations of other people. It does, it
Mhm.
changes. And I think that, kids, and wouldn't have changed it for anything with my boys. But yeah, they require, and I required to be there and attentive, and to, yeah, probably that became a focal point for me. And I think that, with their dad, who we
Mm.
got divorced, that was probably a part of it, is just like so much tension on the kids. And I was working in the evenings so that I could be home with him in the day, and he was home in
Mhm.
the evenings, and we just kind of started passing each other as
Yeah.
ships in the night. And eventually it was just like, what's happening, and there wasn't fighting or anything. It was just, we just grew apart, and totally our own faults. We probably, could have avoided that, maybe. I don't know, who knows, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But but it happens. And I think that if you don't if you don't make your relationship a priority, I think that it's very, very common to look back and go, "Holy cow! I've created my own life over here, and you've created your own life over here, and the commonality or common
Yeah.
denominator are the kids, but who are we anymore?" It's kind of,
Mm.
it's a fascinating thing that
Yeah.
happens, I guess. But I think that, and I don't know. I mean, I've had some friends that are like, no,
Mm.
my marriage comes first and my kids come second. And I personally didn't subscribe to that, but then maybe that didn't work out so well. I don't know, or maybe it did. But I think that it's awareness and it's attention, and maybe it's not where one is a priority over the other, but it's just making everything important and checking in. And maybe it comes back down to that communication of making sure that you have date nights, and you go away on vacation together, and you get a babysitter, and you put the
Yeah.
effort in. I guess, you hear like, oh, marriage is so hard, marriage is so hard. I think that the hardest part is staying connected. Marriage shouldn't be hard as far as jealousy and cheating and like that. That's all other issues that are the result
Yeah.
of
Gosh, yeah.
disconnecting. It's the
Mm.
aftermath of already being disconnected. So yeah, I think that's a very common thing. And if people could anticipate that a little bit, and maybe when the kids are around 13, 14, that's when you start to say like, hey, we should probably do a tune up. Things are coming around the corner. They're at that space where they're about to have their driver's license, and they're not going to need us to shuffle in places anymore. And I
Yeah.
mean, they still
Yeah.
need you, but not in the way that like, which shoes should I wear today? Will you put my shoes on for me? Not that, thank God, that's a good thing. But
But no, it is that thing. You sort of come to that sort of age, and maybe a little bit older, and I do think this is
uh-huh,
particularly a masculine trait. You can please correct me. That there's this huge need to have a purpose, and I think purpose is,
uh-huh,
is work and providing for the family in the old fashioned way. And if you are semi-retired or you retire and then the kids are left home, and they do say that there is a big spike the year after people retire, that sadly they sort of pass away because they've had this purpose all their life, and they're getting up and they're doing this thing and they bring the money in, and the kids, and then suddenly it's like, oh gosh, and you're sort of looking around for a purpose, really. And I think that's quite a hard one. But I do think, and you touched on this before, that I think, almost not to expect that your context and outlook is going to change between when you're 25 and 55 is is very peculiar when you think about it. Because if I go and talk to a 25-year-old now, they're very different, and we're not going to be able to talk in the same language. But that's how I was when I was 25. Now I'm sort of 55. It's yeah, I've changed, and not to expect And I like the way you put it. It's not you or I that have changed. It's the framework context that
I
we
always think
see
of that.
things through. So that's changed. Yeah, I
No,
really
no,
like that.
no, I think it's a
Mm.
great point.
I'm not sure
I
of the
always
question
think
there.
of
Sorry,
if that's
just
your second
babbling now.
puberty, is what I call it, your second adolescence between 21 and 28.
Mm.
I don't know why those numbers, it just seems like that. Those are numbers that spoke to me, and
Yeah.
that's what I think. But um, yeah, it's kind of like your second puberty if you think about, and I think that when people get married younger, like in their 20s, 21, 22, 23, and they stay together through
Mhm.
that second puberty, it's probably because they evolved together and they changed together versus because there's so many changes in that
Yes.
space that your chances of changing and growing apart might be a little higher. Scientifically, I have no idea what the numbers are, but I would
Yeah.
imagine it's higher. So when you get married
Mm.
in your 28, 29 ish, although I got married when I was 28 and it still didn't work out. So
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe my theory's trash.
No, but you've lived it. You've lived it, so now you can explain to everybody else. You actually go through the hard yards. So when you and you proved my point really right at the beginning when you said that you knew what you wanted to do in grade 10. So I've always felt that your type of industry is almost as much a calling as it is a job. So how do you protect your own mental and physical well-being? Because you must sometimes hear some things that are very distressing, and you must hear some things that are very difficult. And how do you not keep that in your mind when you're doing the rest of your life, when you're with your
Uh,
boys or your husband or your friends,
it's
etc.?
such a good question, and I don't have an answer for it. I think over time I've learned to have different boundaries, and knowing that I can give my
Hmm.
110% to my clients during their session. And then I am very big on giving people things to
Yeah.
work on outside of the session. Um, and I think I look at it
Hmm.
like I'm here for you. Shoot me a text if you have a question. But I've given everything I possibly can to you right now. And I feel like I'm setting you up to be okay until our next session, and some things for you to learn and grow and gain confidence and practice and ingrain the things that we're talking about. And I'm going to give you that space to go do that. And I'm going to give myself space to go see my next client or go be with my kids. Or so I don't know. I don't, I mean, of course there's, I'll have dreams about clients, or I'll be thinking about them. I'll see a movie, and or I'll hear a song, or I'll read a poem. And sometimes I'll text him and go, "Oh my God, I saw this thing. You're going to love it. I thought of you." So it's almost a running thing in the back of my mind. I don't think you can give that much of yourself and then just kind of like say, "Whoop, well, on to something else." So it's probably a running
Yeah.
something, but I think maybe doing it for so long, I've had to have that type of boundary. Of course, there's working with little kids. I mean, there's some things where I'm like, "Ugh, I can't shake this one. Child abuse, animal cruelty. Oof, those are things that I have a tough time shaking. But I think it also helps to have my own support network
Yeah.
and my colleagues who we can talk about tough cases with and
Hmm.
be able to give each other that support. I think
Yeah.
that's really helpful. Um, so, but I think you're
Hmm.
right. I love my job. I don't know what other job I would do if I wasn't doing counseling. I think maybe animal behavior. If I had to go do something else, it might be animal behavior. But I love my job, and it doesn't. I'm so 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 fortunate to say it doesn't feel like a job, um, because I just really enjoy what I do, and I love connecting with people and seeing their growth and seeing that confidence and that independence that comes out of counseling, and just the reward that I get from that is, yeah, I love it.
And you still yoga? Are you a meditator? Are you
Yes,
a
yes, and yes.
get
Yeah,
outside in nature
I
kind
do.
of
I
person?
love, I when I was in the
Okay.
office, I'm doing remote work now since COVID, but I would have people come in and roll out a mat, and I'd put
Mhm.
together a sequence for them, yoga sequence, and make sure their alignment was correct and everything, and send them home and draw pictures, and they could do it at home. But I still utilize a lot of that in the online, Zoom work is what I do mostly. I'm also getting certified in the Enneagram. I don't know if you've heard of the Enneagram. Oh, it's fascinating. It's a personality structure, but it's not really a personality test. It's so much deeper than that. But I've got about two more training
Mhm.
sessions, and then I'll be certified. But I still need to really delve into it before I feel like I'm, even close to proficient. It's pretty in depth, but basically there's these 9 subtypes. I'd show you a picture. Do you want to see a picture of? Okay, hold on. So right before we started, everybody, my
Mm.
computer crashed. Some of my, but this this is the structure of it, and
Ooh.
I had to write this out so that I could remember it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
there's 9 different types, and and then you have some arrows and some wings. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
we'd have to set up a whole other like 4 more hours to go over it. Yeah,
Oh, definitely. Well, so
it
when you're
is. If you
comfortable, I'd love
haven't,
to
yeah,
just
you'll
spend
have to
4 hours
look
talking
into the
about it. I love those sort of
Enneagram.
things.
One of the books that I really
Hmm.
like is let's see,
In
this lady Beatrice Chestnut. It's her book, and it's the complete Enneagram, and
Mhm.
it's kind of thick, but I'm listening to it on Audible also because I have a hard time reading books and staying focused. But um, it's just fascinating, and it's so in depth understanding who you are and why you operate in certain ways and where your
Mhm.
defense mechanisms are and how you avoid negativity, avoid conflict, and your own number of how you operate. It's just so I'm really excited to start using that with people individually and with couples, because it's understanding where's my partner, why is my partner doing these things, like maybe it's not personal, this is their personality structure,
Yes.
and here's how they're operating, and now that
Mhm.
I understand that, I don't have to
Mm.
take it personally. It's really fascinating.
So you want to go
Yes.
on a sort of a Tinder date and pull out your chart and say, "Look, this is me." What? Where are you on here?
I'm
Right?
gonna
No, I
need
can't. No, no.
you to answer a
I
few
need an
questions
enthusiast
first,
individualist.
like
Yeah.
52 questions. Is that okay?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just fill in this quick survey before we have a drink.
that's
No,
it.
I was going to finish by asking, well, what's next for you? But it sounds like this is next. It sounds like you're. I think it feels like if you feel. I feel very. I feel very akin to you in that I get a real sense that you're a sort of lifelong learner, and life's not going to be long enough for either of us to learn all the things you want to learn.
My
Isn't
number
it
is a
boring if you're not
7,
constantly
and the
learning
7
stuff?
has like a bunch of projects going on at the same time. And I just want, you're right. Like, I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to understand people.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to, if I had the money tree in the backyard, I would travel and go learn different cultures and different, I'm a TikTok person, and I love world talk. Yeah, it's the hashtag world talk. I love getting on
Hmm.
there and seeing the world and their cultures. I hope TikTok doesn't go away, um, because it's such a
Mm. It's one of the things I say
oh,
to. It's one of the things I say to the children. So my wife's from Australia, and moved here when she was well, went traveling when she was 22, and for a year. And we just keep saying she's running a bit late. And then we met, and foolishly she decided to stay. But it's one of the things that both of us have been very fortunate. So I think I've
oh
worked in like 40 countries around the world, and I was fortunate enough to spend some time living in the US, and then sort of
oh
worked in South Africa and Australia and China, and exactly. I think it's one of the things I'm really desperate for the children to
yeah.
do is just get out there and travel. Really, there's so much. I think it's so. I think it creates such an insular personality if you don't let yourself be exposed to and it is very hard to go somewhere and not judge how people live, behave, eat, whatever. But all you're doing is judging it against what you're used to. So if you're used to going to the supermarket and the shelves are completely full and you can buy whatever you want, and you go to a country where it's not like that, or people. But I've always found such generosity of spirit when I've travelled, and typically from people that have less than me, far less than me, and it's really interesting how people are very keen to show off. I mean, I mean, if you want to travel to London, we've got 2 spare bedrooms. I'm sure my wife would be very happy for you to come and stay. But yeah, no, seriously, it's I love to show people around and show them things, and just that was one of the big benefits with Justine coming from Australia. A lot of her friends will come and sort of stay, and it gives us a chance to go and see things that tourists see, and it's fascinating when you just take them to places and you talk about things and different foods, and it's a really good thing to be able to travel. And we are fortunate that through online, through virtual reality headsets, whatever, we can go and look at things with Google Earth, for goodness sake. I mean, how amazing is that? No matter what you think about Google, I can literally type in my father-in-law's address in Hawthorne, Australia, and zoom straight in on his house, and it's extraordinary. And if I had your address, I can zoom on your house, see where you live, see what the streets are like, see your local shops there. That's amazing. I think it really is. Yeah, I mean, when I traveled as a sort of a youngster, I used to sort of send a fax once a month to my parents to tell them where I was, and that was it. Came back with like 20 rolls of camera to get developed, whereas now
we were when my dad was in the Air Force, so I'm 52.
Yeah, absolutely.
My dad was in the Air Force. We lived in Italy for about 3 years, but I was so little. I was 2, 3, 4 years old, and so but yeah, my parents have stacks of the boxes of slides that they took, and they're collecting dust in the basement. We've got to do something with these slides. But to I got a chance to take the kids and my husband to Europe last year, and we were there on. I mean, I was on a mission. We are going everywhere. We're going to see everything, and it was like, hurry up, the train's leaving. We gotta go.
Okay.
And I think when we go back again at some point, we're going to pick one place and just I think I needed to like
it's
exactly.
It's hard, isn't it? You would like to say it's a long way to get there. So once there, you want to see everything. But what my in-laws did, which is quite cool. So they travelled a bit before, but they from Australia went to France and got a house there for 3 months, which wasn't that expensive, and then did little travels from there. Because once you're there, France to Italy is an hour. France to Switzerland is half an hour. France to Germany, the border's there, so you can do all these things, but just have a base and then go and do things. Because I think my favorite ever holiday was when we was Tuscany in Italy. Just that was BC, before children.
So
it was quite different. Holiday.
I hope you can do that.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, sorry, I could talk to you forever, but thank you so much for your time today. You've been really generous, and you've handled the computer problems.
I know, I got the blue
calm
screen,
and not
so
chaos,
in my head
I'm super impressed.
My computer, and now we've got tariffs, so I can't even get a new one if I need one. So we'll see what that looks like. Yes,
no,
I'd
love to talk to you again once you've done the Enneagram thing.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. It was so nice to meet you.
All right, thank you. That's a pleasure.